What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have yet another album review for you. Again, this is kind of a slow week, and releases are slowing down, but every now and then there are some releases that pop up that we want to go over, so we're probably not going to be reviewing stuff in bulk, but definitely have some targeted spots, and this was definitely one of them, because we are going to go over the latest offering from Convocation, No Dawn for the Caliginous Night. This also comes out on the 24th of November on Everlasting Spew Records. This band formed in 2013 in Finland. This is their third full-length overall. We've actually been over all their albums in one form or another on this channel. Their debut, Sears Across, I thought was really solid, and we both reviewed Ashes Coalesce, and it's just absolutely soul-crushing funeral doom / death doom. Now, this is a two-man act. I forgot to write down who the vocalist is, but he is really good at his job. But the guy that does all of the music is one Lauri Laaksonen of Desolate Shrine, which he does all the music for that band too, and I love Desolate Shrine.
I do too. I'm a big fan of that band.
Evil, dissonant, and just ugh. But this is, well, I mean, definitely funeral doom, kind of crossed with death doom, and it kind of bleeds over into Desolate Shrine, at least in its more slow, sinister moments. Funeral doom, you think more melancholy, morose, definitely sad, because the whole thing should sound like you're going to a funeral, or attending one, or burying a body under not criminal circumstances.
Or being buried.
Yeah,
again,
there you go.
Not criminal circumstances. Yeah.
And since we've gone over their previous two albums, we figured we should check this one out, because it's been a while since we've gone over some flat-out funeral doom on here. And, well, I mean, funeral doom is slow, monotonous, and miserable. And I think because this guy comes from Desolate Shrine, it's also kind of evil. Like, this is just dark and cold, like as dense as a collapsed star and as frosty as just dead cold space.
As frosty as the current outside temperature here in our hometown.
Oh yeah, no,
it's plummeted massively over the last couple days, and I'm dressed for winter. He's dressed for winter, and the music certainly alludes to that as well.
And despite it being much harder to dig a grave in cold weather, this band is definitely down for it. This is slow, plodding, monotonous in both good and bad ways. We'll get into that, because that's kind of an issue some people have with funeral doom. But in terms of like the overall sound of it, it is just massive and depressing. Production, actually, this was mixed by Lauri, but they got one Greg Chandler to do the mastering, which we just recently brought him up because he did the production work on the last Cruciamentum album. And for those that don't know, Greg Chandler is like the main guy behind Esoteric, which is definitely a band I think this band emulates to some degree. That and like Mournful Congregation. It's a little bit more epic, but it's, again, slow, plodding, dark, dismal, and this band is 100% not here to put the fun in funeral.
No, they are not. The sound, of course, gigantic, cavernous, layered to the nines. Lots of guest vocals on here. The opening track, Graveless Yet Dead, features Natalie Koskinen from Shape of Despair. Long-standing,
very depressing band. I absolutely love that band, but I don't listen to them often because I don't want to feel bummed out all day.
And she does, in fact, bum out. Here, the descending female clean vocals in here are absolutely beautiful.
Haunting.
Yep, haunting.
And how she plays off of the main vocalist on here, whose growls are huge. Like, he's got awesome growls. Like, kind of like an extended Ackerfeltian roar.
Oh, yeah. Very bloodbath, like Fathomless Mastery type, just huge roar.
And they do a good job with the cavernous effect, how it overlaps over words often, so you almost get this sort of continuous roar. And the guitars themselves almost kind of have like a little bit of that HM2 sort of, snarl to it, but they're much more down-tuned and just gross sounding.
Got some grit to them, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Lots of big, gigantic melodies. There's a lot of synth work in this. In Graveless Yet Dead, there's an organ, there's a cello, there's some deeper bass register. Like, they really do a good job to just fill in all the spaces.
The cello work in here, I think, is really good, and it's kind of all over the album, and it was actually done by Antti Potanen. I'm sorry if I'm screwing up Finnish names, but it's Finnish. Your language is difficult. But he is actually an ex-member of Hooded Menace, and he came on just to do cellos on here, and they do a great job with the cello harmonies. Like, they'll layer the cellos, and they'll also do harmonies with the guitars and synths. Like, this album is very lush. Just pretty much every conceivable little corner, a space of emptiness could hide, it is filled with sound on here. But as much as this album kind of like thrives on like melancholy and just, you know, that somber, depressive mood that you 100% look for in Funeral Doom, there's some actual like heavy, sinister, dark moments on here. Atychophobia, which we found out is the fear of failure, and Lepers and Derelicts. Both of those songs have like just some absolutely sinister, crushing death doom breakdowns where the riffs feel way more aggressive. They're not just that steady drone in the background that's generally accompanied by like layers of synths. Like these, the synths kind of drop back and the guitars take the forefront. Even the drum work gets a little bit more peppy, I would say.
Yeah. The drum work I thought was actually kind of cool because it's not typically just the simplistic like boom, ka. It's in Funeral Doom. Like, there's a lot going on. Like, in the song Between Ether and Land, there's a really cool, like, stuttered snare drum pattern that kind of gives it almost like a swingy groove, especially when it drops out and it isolates that for a minute. And that's just kind of like a non-typical trope for Funeral Doom, like that there's actual groove going on in the drums, or that they are a little bit more upbeat at times.
That song, too, I would say is kind of, like, non-typical, at least in terms of their sound. Like, it has its place where it is, you know, very grand and very epic, but that song, one, being an instrumental, is a little bit different, but the second thing about it is it feels more cinematic, and it doesn't necessarily feel like a slow road to Bummerville like the rest of this. Like, this one sounds kind of huge and almost bright at spots. Like, it starts off almost like a Tangerine Dream track where it's just layers of droning synths, like waves of ambience. And then everything else kind of slowly starts falling into place. Like, you start hearing the drums come in, a clean melody, and then it actually erupts into some really catchy riffs. You get that ghost-noted pattern. And towards the end, it gets kind of bright and soaring, or at least bright and soaring in comparison to other tracks on here. So if this was probably on any other album, it would be the miserable instrumental. But on here, I don't know, like, it feels, you know, kind of like you're hovering above a giant canyon and you're just kind of taking in all of the scenery. It just feels like the scope of the song is much bigger. Like, instead of, again, like looking into a bottomless tomb, which would describe a good chunk of this album.
Right.
Yeah, like, imagine a Funeral Doom band that really, really wanted to do the score to like a giant cinematic epic like Dune. It still makes it its own, like it's still doomy, it's still crushing, but again, it kind of has this, you know, broader sound to it. Now, we brought up there were other guests on here, and I think they used their guests really effectively. And in fact, one of them was kind of a big surprise.
Yeah.
But on the second track, Atychophobia, being it is the more, I don't know, I think straightforward kind of heavy track. Like, yeah, it has the big droning riffs, but there's some more death metal moments. They actually have Nico Matalainen. I'm sorry. Anyway. He's the frontman of Corpsess, and he adds some extra gravelly death metal vocals towards the end of the album. It kind of caps off the, you know, more just kind of brutal nature of that song, at least in spots. Again, all this is very slow and miserable, but he works really well on that song in particular because, I mean, the vocals are already dark and sinister. Why not add another dark and sinister vocal just to cap it off?
Right. And while it is still melodic, it does have some really heavy grooves to it. In fact, once it gets out of this, like, kind of light, synthy, almost angelic part, it drops out with these downright brutal chugs.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't see that coming either.
There's a couple of moments on here where they kind of just isolate it down to, like, a single sort of like clean melody, whether it's, you know, a little bit more, you know, bright or just super doomy and you kind of feel the doom coming to hit you. It's really cool just to hear kind of the song get deconstructed and reconstructed. And a lot of these songs, because they are longer, that kind of happens a bit on here.
And then there's the last track, which is the lengthiest of them all, at 12 minutes and 36 seconds, that has actually one of my favorite guest stars, Jason Netherton from Misery Index. And then along with him, spoken word by Samantha Alessi from Ferrum.
And yeah, I was kind of shocked to see Jason Netherton's name on there because everything I think he's ever been on moves 20 times faster than everything on this album. But I also didn't know that he moved to Finland, like, recently. Like, he's been a Marylander pretty much his entire life up until here recently.
That's a hell of a move.
Yeah.
From Maryland to Finland. I mean, maybe he wanted to stick with the areas with land in them. So been in Maryland all this time, I guess I can go to Finland. But yeah, in this song, first of all, Jason Netherton's performance, the growls in here are absolutely crushing. Like, I've never heard him spit vocals at this speed. Like, he actually really does a really good job conveying Funeral Doom vocals.
He's always had, like, a very clear delivery, but, like, you know, with Misery Index, it's not really needed for a lot of super long, sustained growls. And yeah, he sounds great on this track.
A lot of big chugs going on, but this song also does kind of drag along a little bit. And now, granted, Funeral Doom is not known for doing things with a quickness.
Yeah, and well, we were talking about this before we were listening to this. Like, all right, Funeral Doom, I'm a fan of it, but it has to be done in a particular way. And there's this whole thing with, like, monotony. Sometimes it can be really good, and sometimes it can just drag. And this is kind of a case where I think this song kind of drags. Like, you know, generally with, like, the good monotony, it's building layers on top of that, whether it's, like, lush synths, a different vocal pattern, maybe a clean melody on top of the droning riff, because you kind of have to have a droning riff for Funeral Doom. But this song kind of just hangs out. Like, it stays in kind of one gear, and honestly, like, the coolest thing about it are probably the vocals on it, because Jason Netherton does a great job. Samantha's spoken word is very haunting and creepy.
And when the two of them come together and her spoken word is underneath his growls, like, it's a really cool thing. This song changes mode a lot, too. Like, it'll get into that big droning section where it does layer, but then it cuts out to just, like, ambient strings and something quiet. And while it does build well, it always builds back to that same droning pattern. Like, you're not building things on top of things, you're just reintroducing things.
Yeah, and, you know, kind of a thing with Funeral Doom is sometimes you are stuck waiting for things to happen. Like, the beginning of Lepers and Derelicts starts off with, like, just these deep droning synths that seem to carry on forever. It kind of reminded me of, like, the opening scene of Spaceballs, where you see Spaceball 1, and then you keep seeing Spaceball 1, and then you keep seeing Spaceball 1. Yeah, imagine that, except, you know, with a, like, sci-fi horror score behind it. It's just kind of going on too long, and it's a lot of build-up to, you know, what I would consider a pretty cool song, but at the same time, I feel like you could have cut that in half. Now, this one kind of makes up for the weight with some particularly ghastly growls on there. It does have its heavier, chuggy sections. And the clean choirs on there, which I'm not sure if those were guests or that was just the vocalist, like, kind of layering his vocals, but there's some cool stuff that pops in it. It's just a lot of waiting for it to happen.
And those vocals in particular are some of the most desperate, like, pleading, like, no, God, on there. And I really like that part, at least. All over this record, there was a lot of ebb and flow, like, where it just straight cuts off. And then a clean part comes in, and then that cuts off, and it goes back to heavy, and then it cuts off, and it goes back to something somber. Like, there's a lot of, like, I feel like cut and paste areas in here.
Yeah, I got that, too. Like, multiple songs kind of stitched together. You know, sometimes you get that. While I like a lot of that, though, like, you know, like the longer drawn-out songs, they have to be done a certain way. And I feel like this album went from, like, digging a grave to, like, flat-out mining to the center of the earth for more misery. Because, like, it just kept going, and it wasn't necessarily adding that much to it. But overall, I mean, honestly, I thought it was pretty good. Like, you know, it's dense, it's brooding, it's got good melodies to it. The production on it, I think, is wonderful. It's just sometimes it's a little bit long in the tooth, and I know it's Funeral Doom, and that's kind of a characteristic of it, but sometimes this feels long in the tooth even for the style. So overall, I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. I like most of this. I especially like the instrumental. The instrumental is probably my big standout, but Aticophobia I think was solid, bringing in like some more straightforward death doom elements or death metal-ish. It's heavy in a lot of different ways. Like it's emotionally heavy. It has like some flat-out crushing riffs on it that kind of come out of nowhere and surprise you with how brutal it can get. But a lot of this kind of just hangs out in that droning, miserable gear. And while that is exactly what you sign up for when you pick up a Funeral Doom album, it can get a little, monotonous at times, and not the good kind of monotonous. But overall, if you're a fan of esoteric and definitely mournful Congregation, Funeral, another solid band, check this out. Pretty much if your crippling seasonal depression needs a soundtrack, this would probably do.
We are definitely in that area of the country. The sads, as they call it here, are about to kick in. For me, this is a 3. I find personally, even in Funeral Doom, that if something is going to hang out for a long time, it needs to at least build or go somewhere. And not that this doesn't always not go anywhere. There are definite pluses to this. The heavy riffs in Aticophobia, the really sweet kind of movie soundtrack of Between Aether and Land, and the vocals, dude. The vocals all across the map are really fucking spot on. Very huge songs, very gothic and sad and depressive and all the things that this impending winter is about to be. I like that the drums are more than simplistic and in the pocket. There's a lot going on. It's just, for me, sometimes when it drones out for a while, and sometimes some of it seems kind of like stitched together. Like, I don't like the fact that it gets really heavy and then it drops out and then it goes clean for a minute or two and then it gets heavy, but they don't stick with it. Like, there's just a few things that I latch onto even in Funeral Doom that I didn't necessarily find here. But overall, it's still a 3. It's still a good listen. You're into stuff like Solothus or Mournful Congregation, or just pretty much a myriad of cavernous giant Funeral Doom bands, you're probably going to like this. I definitely recommend checking it out.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our YouTube channel, but thrallsmetal.com is where you go to find Thralls Metal stuff. We have new shirts. We have old shirts at a discounted price. We even have hats now, so if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
I think with the winter months approaching here, we should look into getting beanies. Last but not least, certainly always a ton going on here at Thralls of Metal, although we're slowing down on reviews. Doesn't matter, we got our end of year list coming. I know we got some retro reviews going on. We're working towards the Black Dahlia Murder ranking, which is going to be a ton of fun. But really, all this would be pointless if not for you guys. You guys are what make this channel pretty fucking amazing. We're happy to have you here. We are so thankful that you guys interact with us and keep clamoring for more, because more is what we're going to bring you.
Yeah, like you said, tons of stuff coming your way. Trust me. I got a bunch of stuff I'm working on, of course, because it's me. Either way, you guys all roll, and we will catch you later.